Joining me now is a federal minister and longtime environmentalist, Stephen Guilbeault. Mr. Guilbeault, thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, the Supreme Court has ruled that the federal government has the right to impose minimum carbon pricing on the provinces. So what is your government's message tonight to those reluctant provinces?
Well, I think the Supreme Court ruling puts the debate as to whether or not we should act and whether or not the federal government can act on climate change behind us. So now let's work together, all of us. There's a couple of provinces that have their own system, which is totally possible under the federal scheme that was put forward in 2016. Quebec has its own system. British Columbia has its own system. And now those provinces that challenge the authority of the federal government to do that basically have two choices. They can go with the federal system, which is in place right now, or they could decide to come up with their own system, which would need to pass an equivalency test, which is the case for British Columbia and Quebec.
Okay, so what are you making of what you're hearing from the provinces? Because we've had response from Alberta, from Saskatchewan. We had even comments from Manitoba, which has a bit of an outstanding case. But what are you making of what you're hearing?
Well, I think I've heard from Quebec, Ontario, which in both cases have said that they were disappointed with the Supreme Court ruling, but that the debate was over now, and they were going to. I mean, Quebec already has a system. I'm not exactly sure what Ontario it was hinted at, but they seem to take notice and now ready to move on to something else. Will they do their own system? Will they use the federal system? I'm not sure. I think the same is true of Saskatchewan. I don't think that the premier is pleased, to say the least, with the ruling. But I think I heard him say as well that he was, the debate is over now. Let's move on. Clearly Premier Kenney seems to be operating on a different reality. I mean, I heard part of his press conference, which kept referring to a ruling by an Alberta court, but ignored the Supreme Court ruling. So I'm not sure what's happening there.
Well, let me ask you then one thing that came up from Premier Kenney and was also mentioned by Premier Pallister, who has a separate problem with the government, but they are both accusing Ottawa of a double standard. They're saying that both Premier Kenney and Premier Pallister are suggesting that your government is letting Quebec off more lightly, is the expression, that it's being allowed to impose a carbon price per ton, which under the cap and trade system, which is only a fraction of the amount that Ottawa is going to impose on the provinces, the rest of the provinces. How do you respond to that?
Well, Manitoba and Alberta could have the same system as the Quebec government tomorrow morning if they wanted, and if it had the same stringency as Quebec does, then it would pass the federal equivalency test. So if they're so envious of it, they could go ahead and adopt it. There's nothing preventing them from doing it. It is true that the price per tonnage is less in Quebec than at the federal level, but these are two different systems, and when looking at equivalency, the price per ton is not the only thing we're looking at. The Quebec system is very broad in terms of its coverage. It's one of the broadest in the world, actually. So there are a number of factors that go into the evaluation of the stringency of a system. But again, Jason Kenney, Premier Pallister, Premier Moe, if you like the Quebec system, go for it. I'm sure. In fact, I think the Quebec government indicated today that they would welcome other provinces joining them. So, hey, let's do it.
Okay. Now, in terms of, as you know, the provinces who had gone to court against you, they were having imposed on them the federal carbon tax. Is there any room in the federal position for any modification in your backstop that if they choose to have this imposed on them? Is there any room for modification in terms of what Ottawa is going to be imposing on them if they do not produce their own programs?
First, I know often people refer to it as the carbon tax. It is not a tax. And in fact, the Supreme Court of Canada, in its ruling today, defined why it's not a tax. So, we should refer to it as carbon pricing. It's a levy.
Right,
I know some people will say there's no difference, but there is a difference. No, I don't think the idea is for us to. We've said for many years now we need to do more on climate change, not less. We announced a new federal plan back in December, which shows how Canada will do even more, and provinces need to step up to the plate as well. We're more than willing to do our part. We want to sit down and discuss with provinces how this can be done, but it's not about giving a free pass to people, about going easy. It's about going at this hard and fast, but working together while doing it. And in fact, today of all day, the American Petroleum Institute, which has historically opposed just about every measure having to do with climate change, a U.S., one could have argued a climate denialist organization, came out today of all day saying that the U.S. should also adopt carbon pricing to make their companies more competitive in a more and more climate-constrained world.
Okay, a last question politically. I mean, obviously the legal battle's over. The highest court of the land has spoken, and there are no further legal avenues. But there is a political battle, and for those recalcitrant, those reluctant provinces who took you to court, some of them are still saying that this is an era of big brother government, Ottawa imposing on the provinces a one-size-fits-all, or it's sort of basically putting the hammer down. How do you respond to those political criticisms which are continuing?
Well, during the last federal election, Canadians voted in the order of 75% for political parties which support carbon pricing. Obviously, the Liberal Party of Canada, the New Democratic Party, the Bloc Québécois, the Greens. So, I mean, more than 3 Canadians out of 4 believe that this is something we need to do. Our approach is not a one-size-fits-all. As I said earlier, we have 2 provinces in Canada right now that have 2 very different systems that can coexist under the federal government scheme. So we're happy to contemplate proposals from provinces, but proposal about climate action, not about how we can do less, but how we can do more.
Okay, Stephen Guilbeault, thank you very much for taking the time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.